always the best. Hey, everybody, I'm Matt Margolis. I'm the head of community at Lawtrades. If you don't know what Lawtrades is, we are a legal tech company that provides staffing solutions to really busy in-house departments. Attorneys, paralegals, legal operations professionals, compliance specialists, like we're going to talk about today, contract managers. I am super happy to talk about this topic because I've built a compliance team. I've been a part of a compliance team, and it's a really fun subject. I mean, it's a fun subject for all of us. So I think everyone listening, it's a fun subject for them as well. I will do none of the awesome panelists justice, so I'm going to ask one by one if they can introduce themselves. Adam, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining. Excited to do this afternoon. Adam Van Wagner here. I'm the Chief Legal Officer at MoneyLion. I'm a fintech based in New York. You can see over my shoulder, the fire escape in the New York office building I'm in. So there you go.
Awesome. And Andria?
Hi, I'm Andria Jones. I'm head of legal compliance at Cloudflare. We're an internet company based in San Francisco. I oversee traditional sort of ethics and compliance, along with trade compliance and then government contracting compliance in the tech space. So look forward to this conversation with you all. Thanks for having me.
Oh, pleasure. And Natalie?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Natalie Hallerby. I am head of compliance at Found. We're a fintech company based off of San Francisco. I can oversee our CMS and BSA AML and parts of the legal departments in our little company.
Awesome. I guess for context for myself, in a prior life, prior to being head of community, I was the director of legal and risk management at a private equity group where we were dealing with compliance and a variety of different regulators, which was a lot of fun, which was absolutely definitely no sarcasm for that. So to get started, I'd love to know everyone here the size of your compliance team and your legal team, and how. Let's start with that. Let's start with that question first, and Adam, if you don't mind starting.
Yep, you bet. So we're about 20 or so all in. So it's six attorneys, 6 or 7, and then it's about 15 in compliance. So a little bit a bigger compliance team rolling up into the department.
That's awesome. Andria?
Yeah, so we're about 3,000 employees now. Our legal, public policy, and then trust and safety teams are all together under LPT, and there's about 85 of us globally. And then in terms of compliance, we have 10 people focused on the disciplines that I shared before.
Oh, wow. Natalie?
Yeah, so our company, it's a startup. We are just a little bit shy of 200 people in the compliance department. Specifically, we're 9 folks, and then we have 3 risk ops people also reporting into compliance.
Wow, I had 2. That's all. It was me and somebody else. It tells you this, right? It tells you the scope of how big and small a compliance team can be, depending obviously on your regulator, your framework, whatever you're dealing with. So let's start with that, because for me, I had to fight for that one person. I had to fight with the CFO and a C-suite generally. So I'd love to hear from all of y'all. How do you fight for the budget to build out a compliance? And anyone could actually, Adam, why don't you start? I think we're going.
Sure. We'll maintain order. No, yeah, look, it's a great point, and maybe it's legal and compliance is often seen as a cost center, right? And so, but I think when you're dealing with, hey, it's your CFO or whoever it is, you kind of have to build out a strategy that says why is this not a cost center, right? Why is putting a good compliance team in place going to be there to obviously protect the business, to work with the business, to ensure compliance, either to kind of look at it as savings down the road, or I would say just helping build and design better products and better marketing, right? And so I think in those terms, that's a great way to approach it, with particular folks like the financial team, when you are adding a lot of staff who are not directly revenue generating, right? So that was certainly one approach I took in terms of building a team.
Absolutely. And Andria?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything that Adam just said. And on top of that, I think it's really also trying to use compliance as a strategy. So even something like government contracting falls under my team. Well, in order to be a government contractor, you have to have like A through Z in place just in order to secure those deals. So a lot of it is, if we have these in place, then we're actually eligible to do this many more deals. Or in terms of building out our data centers globally, like if we want to have a data center and provide services in this jurisdiction, like we need to have these things in place first. So I think a lot of it is also just trying to tie compliance as a strategy, saying if we can tighten these things up, then that will open up for more business, which is, as much as we aren't generating revenue, we can enable the business to do so.
That's how I got a paralegal. That is the best strategy. We can help out sales. We can help out everybody. And Natalie, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I can only echo what Adam and Andrea said here, but honestly, I do think, Andrea, hit something really important here. I think making sure, CFOs and other people at the table understands what meaningful and smart innovation is, and have that compliance lens on it will save money at the end. It might not be gaining money right off the bat, but it's saving money down the line. And two, like when you deal with fintechs, a lot of the times you have partner banks, or you want to apply for an OCC charter, that type of stuff. You really need to have a proper compliance department and proper controls in place.
Absolutely.
Yeah. By the way, just to kind of piggyback on some stuff.
Sure.
I think if folks are on the call here who are kind of like just starting out or just like jumping in, like I think it's understandable that you may not know like where to start. And I think part of this is just start small, right? Like if I currently there's like 15 compliance people on the team. Like it didn't start that way, right? It was more in the mat zone where it was like a couple of people on that team. You got to start. And so it's kind of like put one foot in front of the other, build the team out. Right. I think it can be kind of daunting to think, okay, what is like a fully functioning CMS look like? Tackle the things that you're lawyers, you're like good at looking at risk, identifying like where things need to get solved, and think about compliance the same way, right? And that was kind of how I navigated early building blocks of a department, and it's a suggestion that worked for me. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I think let's start from the beginning, right? Like identifying the compliance program, identifying what, I guess effectively who you need and why you need that person. And I'd love everyone's thoughts on that. I'll say preliminarily for myself, I was in the healthcare space, or at least a portion of our business was in the healthcare. So immediately I'm like, well, let me go take a look at the regs for HHS. Let me take a look at the regs for CMS. Let me take a look at everything relating to healthcare in this particular business. And from there, I started to build out the framework. But everyone else, or I guess we'll start with Adam again. I apologize. This is how it looks on
okay. You guys sure we can switch order, like.
Actually, Adam, I'm going to pause you. Natalie, why don't you go first?
And sorry, the question was, how do we start?
Yeah, how do you even start?
Okay. Yeah. So I think there's different ways to do this, right? Like my suggestion would always be to start with a risk assessment, understanding who your regulators are, do an inventory of the regulations that are applicable, and then do that risk assessment to understand where your high risk regulations are, your high risk processes. And then based off of that, one of the things I think is important is try to figure out, okay, what do we need in place to mitigate the high risk areas? And that's typically where you start looking at your first hire. So like for a fintech company, usually that's going to become related to your Bank Secrecy Act and anti-money laundering. So that's right off the bat one of the folks I brought in, just to have a transaction monitoring person and helping and assisting with that. And then, once you have that start of your risk assessment, then that kind of drives your monitoring and testing plan and your policy procedures and all the other stuff you have to put in place.
Sure. Andrea?
Yeah, likewise, I think absolutely doing your risk assessment, figuring out your legal framework. Even when you go to that legal framework, I think you'll find the different pillars you need in your compliance program and then hire out from there. But even with that, taking that framework and then trying to tailor it towards your company specifically and how your company operates. So really digging in, really understanding the markets, the product, who the customers are. So that way you're taking that risk assessment that you've done and then you're really tailoring it to be custom fit to your organization. And then that usually tells you what your next hire will be. Sometimes it's going to be attorneys. Sometimes it's going to be straight compliance folks. And sometimes it's going to be like, one of my first hires was just a program manager. Like, I was a compliance team of one for a fair amount of time. And I outlined exactly like what our framework needed to be, what our program needed to be, but I couldn't put programs in place and then not have someone to help manage the day-to-day administration. So my first hire really was someone who could just be all hands on deck, help administer the programs, and then started hiring more specialists out from there.
Yeah. Yeah. And seeing a couple of good questions here, right? Like that it's difficult to find good compliance talent, and guessing we've got maybe kind of a lot of people who've been in the kind of tech or startup type space, right? And I agree with that. I mean, it was a long process, I think, for me to find that, like, first head of compliance, or just finding the right fit. And I mean, the best thing I can say is network, right? I mean, it's like, it really does matter. I mean, kind of to the broader question, right? How do you start? I do think you have to understand like who's going to be successful at your particular business, right? Like, businesses function differently, and someone who is able to succeed, in a large financial institution or something like that, or just a large organization, may not be right for a smaller business where you really need someone who's going to roll up their sleeves, maybe not be that typical compliance person. And so, maybe a good suggestion on that one is if you're finding difficulty, like, think a little outside the box. I mean, I've known people who've had success where they're not hiring necessarily a career compliance person, but maybe someone who is in like a financial role, like a real detail oriented type person, who can, especially if you got like you've got the substantive expertise or something, but you just need that, I guess, Andrea, like the program manager type person, right? So yeah, sometimes it's hard. Like I hate to give like that kind of answer, but I also will say it's worth taking the time. It's such an important thing to find the right, especially that kind of senior level compliance person to like be the right person for your company.
Absolutely. I'll ask you guys this. For me, after my first hire, I utilized outside counsel because let me backtrack a second and say, sure, I knew who my federal regulators were, but there's a whole regulatory regime on state and local levels. So I utilized outside counsel to more or less explain to me, like, all right, this is other aspects of compliance that you're going to have to deal with, other regulatory regimes and regulators you're going to have to deal with. And that also shaped my next hires. And I wanted to ask, did you all have the same kind of experience? Did you utilize outside counsel to further help flesh out your compliance needs? And I'll start with Andrea. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So one area that we did do that was something that I shared earlier, was in the government contracting space, because as you referred to, like, we have federal government customers, but also when you start digging into like state and local and education, and even looking at different verticals outside of the US, you run into a whole different slew of things that you're being asked to be compliant with that you might not be familiar with day to day. And they might not be large deals. I think we have a number of like smaller deals spread out over various jurisdictions, where the bigger deals are going to be federal, and that's a little bit more straightforward. But then as you start getting in state by state, same thing in fintech, as you're looking at like different state regulations, it becomes really tedious. So we absolutely leveraged, outside counsel can be wonderfully useful in at least doing that original mapping. And a lot of time they have pre-canned materials already that they can just give you as a starting point. And then from there, I think, again, sort of how I had said earlier, like, find the framework, adapt it to your company, and then find someone who can help you administer it. Taking that step of just going to counsel who's an expert in the specific type of law or the specific type of compliance, getting that roadmap from them as like a starting point, and then you can hire someone to help move that forward.
Absolutely. Natalie?
Yeah, I do agree with you, Andrea. We use outside counsel quite a lot for specific areas. So like anytime there's like tax implications and we need to bring that in, we don't have tax attorneys in-house. So we use outside counsel for that, to maybe calculate and do that type of stuff. And then anytime we have services that we, updated services or products that we want to get out there, we do the first run, but then run by outside counsel to make sure things are kosher before we launch. I think the idea of outside counsel also is, it's important to use outside counsel more as a one-off here and there, and so that it doesn't become your day-to-day, because that's going to rack up a lot of, bills as well. So it's like going to be that fine balance between the two.
And Adam?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, they're there. They can be a massive support. Saying the obvious, if you're running a legal and compliance department, outside counsel is very expensive. I know Lawtrades was just noted as a potential person to go to. So, we'll let them speak to their fee structure at some point. But look, outside counsel costs a lot of money. And so, Natalie, kind of to your point, like, to me, from a compliance standpoint, ought to be more of a backstop, right? And part of that, I would say, is, I guess in my view, like, even more so than kind of legal, compliance needs to be like, you need to create like institutional knowledge around, like operational institutional processes that, in some cases, outside counsel can be amazing because they've seen how it's done. They've helped build that. They can, they've dealt with regulatory issues as they've arisen. But, I do think it's good to like make sure like you and your compliance team are the ones like really implementing things. And and then going from there. I will, like, question got asked. I know Matt gave his pitch on good outside counsel, but look, it really depends on the industry. I'm not sure exactly who we've got on the call. We're in financial services largely, and I guess the kind of general recommendation is like find the folks who do kind of more regulatory compliance day to day. Don't always seek out like, all right, the top tier law firms are not necessarily the best ones to do this. It's the folks who it's kind of like more their daily, they're in the weeds, they know the regs backwards and forwards, who are really your best bets.
You anticipated my question. I was going to ask everyone here. So like, how do you find outside compliance counsel? What do you do to find that firm that will help you build, a backstop? Now, I think is the best way to put it. Like that acts as that backstop for your compliance needs and your compliance, team. So to bring back my long-winded answer, obviously I was a litigator in a previous life. How do you find that outside counsel? What do you all do to find that right fit? And Natalie, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's going to come back to networking, right? Like knowing one of the things I do that I think is very important is to keep in touch with other CCOs or head of legal, that type of stuff, and discuss like, what are you guys foreseeing? What does the regulatory environment look like? Who do you guys use typically for these types of questions? Because everybody's kind of working. It's such a small world. You work with everyone at some point all the time. So I think it's just that network thing. You making sure that whoever you use. So for me, it's financial technology space, making sure that whoever we use, someone else that I know have used and they're happy with the results and what they can do.
Absolutely. Andria?
Same thing here. I think the real value is in networking, both for finding outside counsel and honestly just for getting pointers on how to establish your compliance program in general. Benchmarking with your peers is absolutely invaluable. So I definitely ping people to get recommendations for counsel in various compliance spaces. And then also I'm just always like, what are you doing for compliance here? How are you operationalizing this? What have you done for this space? So in addition to just like advice from outside counsel, I think even just advice from your peers of what they found to be helpful with their programs. And depending on where you're located and what industry you're in, there's, I'm sure, a number of different groups. Like I know in the Bay Area, we have several different compliance associations where I've met people and then created more informal relationships where you can just like ping them offline outside of one of the broader community meetings. But definitely tap into community opportunities that are available to you.
And Adam?
Yeah. Agree with what both of you said. And I think, look, I think the other thing is just, I'll just say it's okay to have a little trial and error, right? Like I think a lot of times with law firms or, outside advisors, you feel like you develop a relationship and they're there as kind of like outside general counsel type role maybe, or you're working with one firm. I do think like in this area, it's not a bad idea to just like work with some other folks, like just get a sense of how different firms operate. There's a lot of different ways of going about doing this. A lot of different ways that people can like bill as well. And so, it's maybe hard to juggle different people, but it's kind of a nice way to like learn different ways of handling compliance challenges.
Agreed.
To address the question there, there's another question that we had, but
I will tackle it. So
okay.
On that, just to add at least I don't want to say a war story, but I inherited counsel. I'm sure y'all have inherited counsel coming in, whether you like that counsel or you didn't. And that counsel, I think, was found at trade shows that were industry trade shows in that space, who had really solidified themselves as a big player. They maybe weren't, to your point, like a New York law firm, like a Manhattan law firm, but it was a firm that that's all they did. That's all they knew. And then I ended up finding another firm because maybe it wasn't a complete fit. I won't say. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it wasn't. Probably leaning towards it wasn't. So there was another firm I found, same channels. It was through industry connections that were not necessarily lawyers. They were folks that were just ingrained in that industry, that went to the conferences, that were working this stuff day to day, that were constantly working with the regulator. And they're like, oh, I use so-and-so. They got me out of the jam here, or they helped me build out my policies and procedures. And that was incredibly helpful, finding outside counsel, compliance counsel to make sure everything was smooth sailing. So that was my 2 cents on it. So y'all hired your first person. You're starting to build out your compliance team, and you're using outside counsel as well to make sure things are moving smoothly. How about the next hire? Where does that come from, and how do you start to scale up? And what determines, I guess, for y'all, like, all right, it's time to build? And Adam, why don't we start?
Yeah, in a sense, I think, just as an example, for us, it was like getting that, that leader in place who could do a lot. And then it was just identifying, okay, now we need a real subject matter expert in a particular area, right? And, I think for us, that is really like the BSA, Bank Secrecy Act, AML space, which in, finance is just a mandatory thing. So just making sure we had the right fit there. A lot of this is going to be like, I'm an attorney, right? So, I mean, it's obviously we all are here, but that is not an area I have expertise in, right? And it is a pretty specific area. And so I think just a recognition of like, look, we need someone who's a professional in this space, in this area, where you need to be a pretty, able to take ownership and drive a particular function. Now, businesses obviously are going to be different across the board, right? You may not need that, but I do think like identifying a subject matter expert area of need and like going and finding a really good person is probably a good place to think about for that second individual.
Andrea.
Yeah, so I absolutely agree that subject matter expert, I think it's a fine line between the subject matter expert on the legal side, so that lawyer, and then that sort of maybe non-lawyer administrative person. So figuring out balancing like expertise in volume management and program administration. And then kind of beyond that, it depends on the geography in which your company operates. But from there on out, as I've built up my team, I've then gone and figured out more regional expertise. So it's been outside of the US. Are we expanding in Europe? Are we expanding in Asia? Do we need to know about the different compliance regimes outside of the US? So kind of been like subject matter expertise, administration, and then just regional expertise from there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Natalie?
Can only echo what they both said, but I think just in the fintech space in general, just Adam kind of mentioned this, but the BSA AML was the key hire, just getting someone in there. I actually started off with a doer first and then hired someone to be that expert in building out that program. And then from there, it's our first 3 or 4 hires was just for that department and kind of making that whole program run.
Got it. Do you ever, I guess this is a question personally for me because I never figured out the answer to it, but I never knew what subjects like outside counsel was handling that I knew that I could take internally. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the matter. How did you figure out, okay, I don't need outside counsel to handle X, I can actually hire for it? And was there like a triggering to it, something happening where you're like, actually, it's cheaper to hire someone internally, or it's better, more efficient? I'd love your thoughts on it. This is actually a personal question for me. I would love to know. Adam, if you'd like to start.
Sure. It's a great question. And it's probably an ongoing part of deciding like how best to run your department. It's sort of like, how are you good at running a legal and compliance department question, but it's a good one to ask. So I would say that a way to think about this, right, is, are those processes that they're handling repeatable, and can they be like operationalized, right? And so that's not to take away that it needs sort of expertise in the field, right? But I think if you get to a point, and this is probably true on the legal side too, right? Like, so take an example, like processing NDAs or something like that, or, kind of ordinary course commercial agreements. There comes a point where you say, look, obviously I can ship these all to outside counsel or something, and I'd get a ton of work done and I'd probably pay a lot of money for it, right? Or is it something we can bring in house, et cetera? And then we're building kind of an institutionalized framework around it. So I think a lot of that is portable to the compliance space as well, right? Which is, I need this I can integrate this into the business. I can have someone doing it every single day, and we develop processes around that like make sense for our business.
Absolutely. Andrea?
Yeah, just echoing what Adam said, trying to figure out that line of like outside counsel is great at helping you build that foundation, but then what is repeatable? Where are we seeing things pop up like on a daily, weekly basis? And once things are repeatable enough, and then again, once you can kind of play the numbers game, outside counsel, as we've said earlier in this, like they're expensive. So when your bills are like X for outside counsel versus it would cost Y to just hire someone and to have around the clock help, that you kind of just play the cost benefit situation, and then really figure out, great, are some of these repeatable things? We have the foundation built. Can we have someone just run with this, sort of monitor regulations? And then as sticky things come up, it's not like outside counsel disappeared, of course, but there's someone there that's a resource, but you just don't need to rely on them day to day or week to week as you might have at the beginning.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Natalie?
I just keep echoing what you both say at all times because I come at the end, but I mean, they just said it. They just said it all. I think the one thing I would add to that is like, beyond the repeatable is like, where is the business headed? So is this something, a process or a product or a service that we're going to use for a very long time? If it is, then it comes down to that cost, whether it's cheaper to go to outside counsel or just hire someone. So it's a trial and error for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Sorry, Matt.
Go for it.
I'll say something. I'm curious if others have experienced this, right? Which is, I feel like a good compliance department or compliance team will say, look, we don't need outside counsel for this, right? I've had that happen definitely in a couple of instances where it's like, all right, I'm the lawyer. My instinct is like, let's get outside counsel advice and help with this. I've had numerous occasions where like the compliance group says, look, we could have just done this, and so, part of that's like maybe getting lucky or building your team the right way. But I'm curious if either of you have had that, that experience as well, where all of a sudden your team is doing that kind of on your behalf.
I had that happen, actually, if I could chime in. It was change of ownership for certain licenses.
Yeah.
And I've been utilizing outside counsel, and I'm like, why am I utilizing outside counsel on this? I looked into I saw how outside counsel did it initially, and I'm like, all right, well, one of us internally can do it. It's just it's a very easy process. You thought initially it's complicated, and once fully understanding it, having outside counsel as kind of the backstop to it in case questions, qualms, concerns. And you're right. And then I took that internally. I took that role internally, and likely I could have hired someone to just handle that specifically. And I guess I'm answering my own question that I originally posed, but I could have hired someone to do that. But yeah, so I agree with you wholeheartedly. Anyone else? Do you have any thoughts?
I was going to say expertise, and then also just bandwidth. I mean, sometimes we hand things to outside counsel because we don't have the bandwidth to dig in, and we don't have the bandwidth to handle something. So that's just one of the other use cases, of course, is like they may be the foundational help, or they may just be the supplement because you don't have the headcount at that time, or you've lost headcount and you're transitioning and need to hire someone new and get them up to speed. So they can be helpful in that regard too, of maybe doing some of the day-to-day things that like how to do in-house. You just don't have the headcount at the moment.
Absolutely. Natalie?
Yeah, no, I think when that happens, just like what Adam was mentioning, we do have just recently that happened to us. We have a lot of NDAs and things like that we have to go through, and we have someone in-house just saying, I can do this. I've done this previously. I'm like, fantastic. Let's do them. Yes.
Thank you. You're saving me $800 an hour.
Exactly.
Oh man, that's a fair point. That's a fair response. So I'll ask you guys this too. What I would do is I would do compliance audits, probably, and I have a third party doing it to make sure I knew what was going on, that we were all obviously making sure we're following the correct protocols. But I would also use that to trigger like, hey, there's a need. Oh, hey, did you know about X, Y, and Z? I might need someone, or I might need to start drafting policies and procedures reflecting this thing that was found in the compliance audit. Do y'all utilize third-party audits in that way, or am I crazy? It could also be both. And Natalie, if you want to start.
I mean, it might be both, but no, I actually came from consulting previously, where I assisted fintechs building out their compliance departments. So for me, before even bringing in a third party, I do an in-house audit of ourselves, because if I bring in a third party, the first thing that if a regulator comes in after the fact is they're going to request that report.
Fair.
So I want to be able to at least mitigate some of the issues, if there are any issues, right before the third party comes in. But we do use third party consultants. I have the BSA AML is required to be tested independently on an annual basis, but then we also bring in someone to test our CMS and the rest of our marketing and all that stuff as well.
Awesome. And Adam?
Yeah. Yep. Same with us. So obviously there's a BSA AML report requirement or audit requirement. And we do the same across a number of other, areas. And then, yeah, Matt, to kind of what you asked as well, I do think it can be helpful. Those types of events are helpful to kind of level set and then use that with the business to, obviously address remediations. That's kind of the whole point of a CMS. Like I know maybe this sounds like silly, but in a way, like being a lawyer can often be like trying to make everything perfect and like avoid all like risks and issues or something like that, right? Like in a way, like a compliance department is there to like identify them, right? Like go find the issues, and like that is actually evidence of a properly functioning CMS. So it's like you have to shift your mindset a little bit, which is like, okay, we're finding issues, there's things to fix, it's an actual business, we're dealing with people, things are going to come up. And so yeah, those are opportunities where it's not just anecdotal, right? You've got a report here, often from a third party, that says, look, there's a thing here. Let's go ahead and fix this.
Sure. And Andrea?
Yeah, I mean, we audit ourselves and monitor ourselves regularly. I'm not in the fintech space, so can't align with at least like the annual required audits. But I joke with our internal audit team also, who I try to leverage, like that they're just like my best friends. I love your audit findings, because if you find something and you find a reason why we should have more headcount, why, like if say we're under resourced, sure, go ahead and put audit finding there. Do we really need a new XYZ? Great. Like I'm going to need help or headcount, or like, I will just get more executive buy-in. I mean, that's one of the ways I know is that how do you go to your CFO? And we can definitely outline the risk, but if you have an additional body, whether it's like yourselves, another person within the company, or external saying you need something, that's a great way to leverage just getting more resources for your program.
Fantastic point. Absolutely. They get a pizza party. Like that's how we plan internally. Like you get a pizza party if I get one more body. So I appreciate it. We got a question from the audience. I think it's a really good question. And I think, Andrea, you kind of touched on it initially, and it's what about going international, right? At what stage do you expand globally for your compliance team? And actually, Andrea, if you want to tackle it first.
Yeah, sure. I mean, leverage metrics as much as you can. And it is that like kind of what we touched on earlier too, trying to align yourself, even if you aren't like a revenue generating function, like trying to align yourself with the business as much as you can. So for us, it is like, say how much of our revenue is inside the US versus outside of the US, combined with like, what is the risk landscape? What is the regulatory landscape? So when you look at like, what's your volume and what's your trending, something that Natalie touched on earlier, like not just solving for today, but like solving for the next year, the next 3 years, the next 5-year plan, like where's your company going? Where are your products going? So yeah, so not that I don't know that there's like a magic number, but it's really just looking at your global operations in relation to what's going on inside the US. So that way you can benchmark when you do really need eyes and ears on the ground. Like typically you're going to have sales folks in a jurisdiction first before you have anybody else on like a G&A side. So really thinking about when is it a time where those people in a region who are interacting with customers, they're the people on the ground that present a certain amount of risk. When do they need a local resource? And you need those eyes and ears on the ground too, to be able to connect both with you back at headquarters or in the US, but then also with them on the ground to be their resource in real time, that they can talk about anything instead of trying to catch me in a different time zone, who has, a million different things going on and might not necessarily have that regional expertise. So kind of just a balance there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Natalie?
Yeah, I mean, we are just US based and we haven't gone internationally, but we have talked, right? Like one of the things that we typically talk about is what is our market looking like? What's our growth footprint looking like in the US? And then start thinking through, just like what Andrea mentioned, is the sales component first. So like, what can we sell? How do we get in the marketing space? And that first. And then that's when we start building out the compliance department after the fact.
Absolutely. And Adam?
Yeah, same as Natalie. Right now, we operate purely in the U.S. We have some like personnel, service providers overseas, like I'm sure everyone does. But yeah, same kind of thing. Conversations around that. I do think this is an area where, just given kind of the cost center nature of a compliance team, like if you're doing this, it's probably easier and like more cost effective to just get local outside advisors on the ground for, who you're just utilizing while that builds up in another region, right? It's very expensive to just go kind of hire a team when you're like, you don't want to get out in front of like the business on building that team.
Sure. I've never built internationally, so I'm going to take this to heart because I just don't know the answer to it. So I appreciate it. Now I've got another question, and I think this happens more often than not, especially probably in the fintech space. Regulations change, right? New regime comes into place, and probably a whole new governing body comes in and says, let's change things, let's deregulate, or let's regulate it further. What do? Do you just call outside counsel to figure out what's the next move? Do you start hiring? What's the play when things start to change? And Adam, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would not hire right away. I think it's hard. It's hard to know whether there's like a law that's been passed where you would like really just hire right away. Like, even I'm just thinking of certain things where it's like, there's a big like GDPR kind of ramp, like
Sure.
a number of years ago, right? Where, that was a big thing. And there are other things like that, but look, hopefully I would say you've built a compliance team that's nimble enough to at least do kind of ground level review and, thinking about those issues. And then I would say, look, to be kind of pragmatic about it, part of this is like the size of your business, your footprint in a particular regulatory area, right? There's probably always going to be some businesses that are like going to be more front and center in terms of compliance with this. And you can kind of watch either news developments on this about how they're reacting to changes in law or changes in regulation, or look, we've all seen it. Law firms like to give free advice a little bit, in terms of new things as kind of loss leaders around developing new business. So again, it's all an assessment about like where your business stands in terms of those. But I actually kind of would recommend against just like ramping up a new hire when you kind of don't know what enforcement or like the law is going to look like, or how it's going to be implemented, that kind of thing, before it is.
Absolutely. Natalie?
Yeah, no, I agree 100% with that. I think too, like, if you do your due diligence, meaning like, you have a functioning regulatory change management function and what's coming down the pipe, and you have conversations with the regulators, like whoever it may be, you see different trends moving. And with the new law, you just like what Adam mentioned, it doesn't happen overnight. It's typically a year or 2 years, right? Like anything changes. I think it's the most important thing is understanding whether it's even going to impact your business, if it's applicable, and then what parts of your business it's going to impact, and then whether it's just a process or is it disclosures, is it that type of stuff. But it's just going to be more, is it a process related where you need to have headcounts in there? Then you might want to start thinking about a plan, but hiring right off the bat, I would not recommend to do.
And Andrea?
Yeah, I agree with everything. Even whether it's regulatory or even just like global affairs issues. Like, for example, I cover trade compliance, right? And Russia invades Ukraine. That has like a whole level of like implications that like you can't really plan for. It's nothing that you even really necessarily see coming. Is this something where we're going to see sanctions effects for a year, for a month, for 6 months? Like, no one knows how long the crisis is going to last. So I can't really just jump on and hire someone who's an expert in those sanctions laws in the EU, because it's not a huge ordeal for us, and it's not something that may be long lasting. So yeah, trying to leverage outside resources until you really have a better sense of like the permanency and how big of an impact a different regulation is going to have on you. Something like privacy, whether it's like GDPR or all of the laws that have followed since then, you probably do need a privacy person, because that's not something where like one privacy issue is going to come and that's going to go away. But when you're looking at some of the other things that might be more intermittent, just really trying to suss things out before making that hiring decision.
Absolutely. And that's a fair point about like these just like sudden global events, and kind of you trying to figure out what to do. And you're right, hiring immediately in the face of something of that caliber, especially something that could end up being short-lived, is just unnecessary at best. So we have a question from the audience: how to deal with cross-departmental collaboration and interaction when growing the team. This person finds it very difficult. They just would love some insight from the folks in the panel. Natalie, you want to start?
Sure. I think the first step, actually, we have to like backtrack a little bit, is who you hire. And I think this is where it's going to be really important, like making sure that you hire people. I do typically, I bring people on that I worked with previously, or someone else that I value their opinion, that type of stuff, that worked with. I think being in a fintech space is very different from being in a traditional banking space, very different from a law office. So you need someone that's okay with changes and that can be nimble and flexible and work with different departments and be able to, roll up their sleeves and work. And then to respond to how do you collaborate, one of the things I think is important is to be there as a trusted advisor and try to help out rather than pointing out things that are mistakes or issues and they need to fix. But more so, we might have an issue here. Let's try to figure out what to do without, at the cost of edge team or our customers, or there might be, that type of stuff. So just being able to work with people and just have a good attitude. I think a lot of the times we work with people that do coffees or marketing or, very different from compliance, and what they need is just push things out right off the bat, right? Like, and just making sure that we explain why things can't be that way before we just do something.
Absolutely. Andrea?
Yeah, I've always tried to say that like compliance, you want to be really careful not to just be the no person. So like to what Natalie just said, like you want to be like the how person, like how can we do this so that we're best mitigating risk, instead of just saying absolutely no, can't do that, high risk, because then people are never going to talk to you. People are just going to do it without you knowing. So really trying to be that like approachable person from a compliance perspective, and know that you're a resource and you're going to help navigate something instead of shut something down. So that way you have that base level of trust, and then the collaboration just comes a little bit more naturally. I think the first time we rolled out an all company legal training, like the number of people who actually came as follow-up and said, I wanted to like, something that you touched on, I think we have a real opportunity in our program to put a compliance thing in place. And I was like, wow, people actually like are interested, they're engaged, they want to be compliant. And if they know that you're going to help them be compliant versus just like completely shut them down and try to avoid what they're doing or slow them down, I think they're much more likely to work with you. And then another thing that I think is a constant challenge is, while some people are compliant, like making sure that people know to come to compliance early, because it makes it easier for them, it makes it easier for us if they are first sort of identifying an issue to come to you and ask you right away, even if they don't know if it's an issue yet. Or on the other hand, from the compliance perspective, trying to understand how the business works and figuring out where you can insert yourself early enough. Is that joining other teams, regular meetings? Is that being a part of like a product lifecycle to make sure that like certain privacy compliance components are into place like early in a product lifecycle. Just figuring out exactly where you can insert yourself, and then also just where you can be that trusted advisor.
Absolutely, absolutely. Adam?
Yeah, I agree with all that. And then I'll also just say like it is difficult, it's like, yeah, stipulate to that. I mean, I don't think there's a perfect answer here. And some difficulty there or tension is probably unavoidable just given kind of the nature of how businesses moves, and that's okay, right? I think, one just other strategy I would add is like in all these conversations, you can think about saying, look, we've got a job to do, you've got a job to do. What can the compliance team do to help, facilitate us getting all to the right place, right? So oftentimes for us, that's been like, look, let's get the marketing team on the phone, right, and do some trainings, or like compliance will take away and like do guidelines or how-tos, or like things that just like show you're a partner in moving the business along, right, and not just that roadblock. I think can go a long way to like getting people to do things like come to you earlier and like come to you for guidance.
It's like the classic, what we're always called, right? The Department of No. We're not the Department of No. We're the Department of, I hate saying the Department of Yes. I feel like it's cliche. Probably the Department of Facilitation. We can facilitate what you guys need to get done.
We'll workshop that. Yeah.
We'll workshop it. I appreciate it, guys. We'll meet after this for a better phrase. We have a question from the audience. I think it's an interesting question. It's not exactly on topic, but I think it is. It's a very, it's something I think we probably should address. Is someone wants to transition into a compliance role. What types of transferable skills are helpful to highlight on, a resume or even in an interview to strengthen if needed? And what do you guys like to see when you're hiring for a compliance specialist? What are you looking for? And whoever wants, actually, Adam, do you want to start?
Sure. I like how someone, saw that people were having difficulty finding compliance people and decided to make a job change during the presentation. So,
y'all are going to see
smart, always looking out. So, keep it up. But look, I really do kind of believe this, in that a lot of it is about operating. And look, I mean, there are absolute skills that lawyers have, but a lot of lawyers, come from a framework of the billable hour, and that it's a lot of just like work and kind of pushing paper and things like that. If you have skills that are more about, operating a business, creating processes, creating those kind of repeatable processes, or building systems, working with data, those are the types of things I would say really highlight. Obviously, like the substantive knowledge is like hopefully there, that's I think a kind of like baseline. But yeah, I would really focus on that kind of like operating experience if you've got it.
Sure. Andrea?
Yeah, same thing. I would echo a lot of those same skill sets, and really just being, if you are a great collaborator, if you have strong program management experience, I mean, honestly, I've even been open to hiring people within a company who already really have that like institutional knowledge. They know how all of your programs and processes work. Like someone can learn compliance. You can have a pretty straightforward program. If you have processes, policies, playbooks in place, like someone can come in and really understand how compliance works. But again, it's layering compliance on top of how the company works. So I would even recommend perhaps within your company, if your company supports mobility, that's something that you could explore, is like moving over to a compliance position, knowing you have that foundational information to begin with.
Absolutely. And Natalie?
Yeah, I just agree to everything they both said. I think one of the things, I recently hired someone that was part of our customer experience team. So they actually knew how to deal with customer complaints and being able to work with different departments, but they also knew the entire, company as far as the processes goes. So I think that also, for a resume gets a long way, because like if you understand how the institution works, or even the financial institution works, you pretty much can learn compliance. Like if you have a good head of compliance or a lead, they can teach you the rest, and you can be self-taught. So yeah.
Absolutely. Guys, I want to thank you so much for your time, for your insight. I'm going to steal all of these things. I am taking the Department of Facilitation. That's mine, guys. I'm sorry. No, but thank you again. I really appreciate it. Everyone appreciates it that is watching. For all you folks still watching, our next event is on October 20th. It's on commercial contracting. We'll have folks from Affirm, Flock Safety, TechCrunch, and Binti. The link to RSVP will be in the chat. Thank you again, everybody. I hope you have a fantastic weekend, and we will all talk soon.